Welcome to Game Theorem, where we have serious discussions about absurd entertainment.
You were, and are, going to do this regardless. Doc Scratch. First Guardian.
Talking about Homestuck again.
Yep, I'm Kyle.
I'm Kira. This is particularly absurd entertainment.
Sure. So we're doing a revisit episode where we talk about one of the series we've previously talked about. We go back and dive in again. Mm-hmm. And we just finished doing our revisit series on Danganronpa, which was very, very fun and whatnot. But now we want to go back and revisit another one of our passions, Homestuck.
Yep.
If you aren't aware, we've previously had Homestuck episodes. We had an initial one where we just kind of introduced you to Homestuck and Sburb. Mm-hmm. Then we had another one where we talked about the different mythological roles. And then we had one where we talked about the history of Earth in the Homestuck universe. Mm-hmm. And the various versions of it. We had another one where we talked about Alternia and Bephoris and the trolls, the alien troll species. Mm-hmm. That was a complex one.
Yeah.
And a lot of this stuff, because of time travel, feeds into itself. So we have to take some time out, and we decided to take an episode to tell you about the game sessions. Mm-hmm. Now, if you remember from the first episode, most of Homestuck is concerned around playing a very metaphysical game that takes you to this otherworldly realm. And that realm is contained within what's called a session. And every different set of players that plays the game gets their own session.
Yeah.
So it's effectively like a mini solar system that exists within its own space, kind of like an atom in a way. Mm-hmm. But again, it's its own like fantasy realm. And we're going to be talking about all of these fantasy realms that appear in Homestuck. Because again, different session for every set of players.
Yeah.
Any thoughts, Kira?
In case anyone doesn't remember, Homestuck is how we met, so it's very special to us.
You don't have to mention it every time we talk about it.
Well, they might not have watched the other episodes. So yeah, that's why we talk about Homestuck so much.
Sure. Mm-hmm. So anything else about the game session? We should try to get them up to speed. If you don't remember, the whole point of the game of Sburb, or Scrub as it's sometimes known, in Homestuck, is to propagate a universe. So I guess a better analogy is it's like an egg, right?
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Your universe is a living creature, a frog specifically, and the game is its reproduction system. Mm-hmm. And the session is kind of like an egg where you're trying to hatch another frog. Yep.
That's a good way to describe it.
Yeah. You could also probably characterize it as like a type of like crucible, or a carriage for the baby frog.
Okay.
Anyway, so we're going to talk about all the different versions. If you remember, there have been multiple universes. Earth was contained within universe B1 and B2. There were two different versions. Mm-hmm. And the trolls were both in A1 and A2. Mm-hmm. It's also important to remember... because when we were going to do this episode, I wanted to give a few corrections to past Homestuck episodes.
Oh, okay. Like what?
In the troll episode, we mentioned we mischaracterized the way Doc Scratch died. I just wanted to add a correction that Doc Scratch died because he knew it was time to die. He wanted to die, so he let his death happen.
Oh, I see.
And another correction, sort of, the epilogues came out since we did that episode.
Yeah.
I mean, a while ago. Homestuck 2 is out. Can you believe that? We're gonna get around to talking about it, but we gotta cover this first.
Yeah.
And effectively, the whole there's a whole bunch of really dumb, controversial stuff in the Earth episode. And one of the things was about how Obama somehow survived one reality and went to the other.
Yeah.
We now know why that happened and how that happened, because he shows up again in the epilogues, and it's just the most awful mischaracterization of Obama.
Yeah.
He's portrayed like a saint.
It's kind of bullshit.
Yeah, he's portrayed like a saint, and that's just not who he is. He's I get he was very silent after 2016.
To be fair, this might have been written
it was.
before.
It was.
Yeah.
But it's darkly hilarious how every time you see Obama in the news nowadays, he's saying something absolutely atrocious.
Yeah.
And And then meanwhile, in Homestuck, he's portrayed to be a saint. My personal headcanon is that he's actually being very manipulative, and he appears to be saintly in Homestuck, and he's not. He's lying when he's doing that. That's my idea.
I would say that it has aged very poorly, especially this year. So yeah.
Oh yeah, certainly. Okay. Anyway, let's get into Homestuck. So we decided to break this up into a bunch of categories because again, there's so many different versions of the way the game goes, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So why don't you read off the list and I'll explain what they are to you, Kira. You can ask me any questions you want.
All right.
And, give any details that you'd like to give.
Yeah, okay. All right, so first we're going to go over the lost sessions. These are the sessions we pretty much don't know anything about, right?
Yeah, they're very speculative. There's not a lot of hard info on them, but because of other info, there's a lot of theories that these sessions must have at some point existed.
Yeah, all right. And it's the Squiddles session?
Yes.
What, 48 Squiddles?
Yes. That's something that Andrew Hussey, the original creator of Homestuck, alluded to existing. But that's not the evidence. The evidence is rather just the existence of the horror terrors themselves, the Lovecraftian eldritch creatures in Homestuck.
How so?
Well, they've been shown several times to have some type of communion ability with the Squiddles franchise within the Homestuck universe.
That's terrifying.
And so it's implied that they have this connection with them. Why? A popular theory is that that's who they used to be.
Oh.
That they used to be a species called the Squiddles. And since Sburb is often played by different species, it stands to reason at one point a game of Squiddles was played, and the end result is they became the horror terrors.
That's terrifying. I do not like the horror terrors.
Well, they're not evil.
I know, but they're really, really scary.
Sure.
They're eldritch.
So that's basically all we can say for that one. We really don't know anything about it, whether it's even true, but it's believed in by a number of people.
Mm-hmm.
Another lost session would be...
the Andrew Hussey session.
Yes. And this is to say that Andrew Hussey is himself a character within the story.
Yeah.
In fact, at one point you even get to meet another character. Like, there's a whole tier of characters that are like authorial characters. You have Andrew Hussey. There's this another one called the Director. Dirk kind of at one point ascends to that level. Doc Scratch also ascends to that level, and so does Caliborn.
Yeah.
So there's this level of authorialness where, like, basically, where did Andrew Hussey come from? Because he's not native to the Homestuck universe. In fact, he created it. So where does he come from? One idea that's been proposed is that he was a Sburb player at some point. And that's how he got the powers of creation. At one point, he's even shown literally wearing a God tier space hoodie, implying he might be a hero of space.
Yeah.
I like this theory, and it would mean that while Hussey is kind of a human, he's not human in the same way we know it. He's like an alternate universe human that comes from some other world that's like a fantasy version of ours. One that has flying horses and gears in the sky.
Why do you say that?
Because that's the world Hussey's in.
Oh, right. Yeah. Okay. We do get glimpses of his world. Oh my god, you're right. Well, fuck. That's awful. That's terrifying.
I mean, and so in that world's effectively a stand-in for our real world, except it's like in the Homestuck world, Earth is a fictional Earth, which differentiates it from the supposedly semi-real metaphysical Earth that Hussey is from.
It's weird.
Like, no one even calls it Earth, because wherever Hussey's is from, what do they call it? The Hussey space or Husseyverse?
I don't know.
Whatever. The point is that's another lost session. We don't know exactly what happened there, but it definitely seems like something must have gone down pre-fiction, pre-story. What's next?
The A1 session.
All right, so this is the first session that we actually know happened. Yeah. And it's the one between the trolls on Before Us.
Oh, right, yeah.
So the trolls that played the game were Damara, Rufio, Mituna, Mulin, Porum, Latula, Aranea, Horus,
yeah.
Aranea, Horus, Kurlos, Cronus, and Mina. Mm-hmm. And Cancri.
And Cancri, yeah. Don't forget Cancri.
So 12-player session. And basically it was a ton of drama.
Yep.
Because what's the first subcategory we have?
Doom timelines.
Right. So basically, with all the different time travel, only one can be the timeline that makes it the furthest. Every other timeline is a Doom timeline. Mm-hmm. Arguably, even the successful one is a Doom timeline in this case.
Yeah, because they basically have to make another session by doing the scratch, which is resetting their session.
Well, basically, they're fated to never win. They do not win the game. So what they do is they have to make a reset, which brings about a 2. Mm-hmm. So a lot of the Doom timelines are basically just them failing over and over again. Damara, who's the time player, specifically makes a quest to sabotage the other players out of spite for the way that they treated her. Mm-hmm. And there's literally an alternate timeline where Rufio becomes a robot horse at one point. Mm-hmm. There's many alternate timelines where the players go god tier, but they weren't supposed to, so it dooms the timeline.
Yeah, there's lots of crap like that.
Right.
Those are all the Doom timelines, but there is the one timeline that actually did happen, and that's the Alpha timeline.
Right, where they did the scratch and they reset the game. Mm-hmm. Now, when you do that, it's supposed to retroactively doom the Alpha, too. Like, it makes the session no longer exist.
Mm-hmm, but they decided to try to get around that by killing themselves before the scratch so that they could live in the afterlife.
Right, and that's where they're found, and you can hear their story in the afterlife.
Yeah.
Because they would rather be dead and ghosts than be erased from existence.
To be fair, Mina just killed them all without their consent. So, yeah.
And then?
And then the Scratch created the A2 session.
And there's many different ones here. So one thing that's interesting is that while the A1 session, there was only a single group of players, because Mina was the one that had dug up the session. Mm-hmm. In the A2 universe version of things, Doc Scratch had the first guardian, the omnipotent deity. He had specifically arranged it so that only the 12 kids there, the 12 trolls, would be able to play the game. Mm-hmm. So there was only one session, with one exception. He also at some point arranged for a character called the MSPA Reader to have a session.
Really?
Yes. We don't have a lot of details of exactly how it went down. All we know is that the MSPA Reader met with Doc Scratch, and Doc Scratch forced him to read Homestuck.
Okay.
The MSPA Reader, he appears in some side content. We might go into more detail about him later.
Yeah.
But basically, he's an alternate universe version of what it is to be a human. He's not exactly what we think of as a human, but an alternate version of it.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But he's considered an alien to the trolls. Mm-hmm. And at some point, he plays a 40-player session, and his planet's called the Land of Stumps and Dismay, and he's really depressed there.
Okay. All right. And
at some point, he gets out, though. Like, he leaves the session.
Yeah.
So the session doesn't go anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So the only other A2 session is the main one played by the trolls.
Yep.
So that would be Aradia, Tavros, Solix, Karkat, Nepeta, Terezi, Kanaya, Vriska, Equius, Gamzee, Eridan, and Fefri.
Mm-hmm. Good job. Yeah.
So and another 12-player session, this time played by a different set of 12 trolls.
Yep. And again, there are a lot of Doom timelines.
Oh yeah, so many. Although not as many as the A1 session. They were very hectic, but at least a little bit more structured than that. Because ultimately they had Doc Scratch guiding them. Though.
Yeah, to beat the game this time.
Right, and Doc Scratch had specifically tried to make it to where they could beat it a lot faster.
Mm-hmm, because he promised the the A1 session that the A2 session would win if they scratched.
Right, but there were still a fair number of timelines where things went wrong. A notable thing is that in Gamzee is almost unkillable. He's one of the most resistant characters in the entirety of Homestuck.
To the point that he has very few dead selves in the afterlife.
Oh, like literally, it's a finite number. In fact,
Whereas with all the others, it's sort of implied that there are almost infinite variations of them.
right. I think, okay, so Gamzee, he has his main self, his dream self, and then there's the retconned version. Mm-hmm. Are there any others? Yes, there's the Homestuck 2 version. So there are 4 Gamzees in existence, while other characters will have hundreds of alternate timeline duplicates.
Yep. And a lot of the different timelines is when...
Actually, Doc Scratch is kind of part Gamzee.
Oh, yeah.
Due to the way Doc Scratch as the deity was made.
Yep. But specifically with Gamzee, he has this thing where he eats Soper slime, which is the slime that trolls sleep in. But
it's a drug.
Yeah, basically. But when he goes off of it, he tends to get a bit murdery.
Yes.
So there are several timelines where he just kind of massacres everyone else.
Oh yeah, there's one specific one where he goes and massacres literally every other player, and then uses their blood to create like this like coded textbook. And because of time shenanigans, that goes back in time, and eventually the alpha timeline gets it. And so this massacre timeline was actually kind of necessary in order for them to succeed in the first place.
Oh, right, yeah, because it did part of the code for it, yeah.
Right. The code needed to make Doc Scratch come into existence. And I don't know if I want to go too deep into talking about Gamzee right now.
Yeah,
but
that's fine.
There are some Gamzee defenders out there, and like I'm okay, with people reinterpreting characters to better, represent things and defend them, believe in them. But Gamzee, as written in the material, I believe is a pretty strong signifier of the patriarchy. His whole thing about religion being a literal patriarchy, literally worshiping the idea of following in his ancestors' footsteps, especially when he goes off of drugs. You might say the drug thing is problematic, but I'd actually argue it's against that. Like, the whole thing is that drugs literally keeps him a nice, happy young man. It's only getting off of drugs. If anything, the Homestuck has a very pro-drug message. Get more drugs.
Yep.
So, I don't know. Take that with what you will. There's also some other timelines we should talk about.
Another specific timeline that happens is Vriska has a decision of whether to go after Jack or not. After
when she becomes God tier.
Yeah, when she's God tier, and she can try to kill Jack or not, and it changes the timeline to the point that there's a Doom timeline where she went to kill him, and then the main timeline is where she didn't go.
Yeah, Jack being a big bad boss in their game.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, there's the alpha timeline is where she was stopped from going there and killing him by getting stabbed in the back by her friend. And this alternate timeline is where her friend didn't stab her. She went and fought Jack, and it's kind of left in the air as to whether she won. Although a lot of people put their bets on her that she won. But it came at the cost of Jack going to kill all of her friends in that timeline.
Yeah, so it didn't matter whether she won or not, because everyone else is dead and they can't be.
Turns out you can't win a game by yourself. And then we have the alpha timeline.
Yes. And this is the one where Vriska was killed by Terezi before she could go fight Jack.
And this timeline, we actually spent like a whole act of the story with, so we have a good idea of where it went, how it went down.
Yeah, we do.
Basically, the 12 trolls split up into 2 teams of 6, and those 6 were going against the other 6 as like a competition sort of thing. Until they realized they had to kind of pull together and make it a single 12-player session to be able to survive.
Yeah.
Although it was always a 12-player session, they just didn't know that yet. And Carcat also specifically set up this temporal messaging board so that they could all communicate from the past and the future to hopefully expedite their travels. Which would have actually been a great idea, except he spent so much time over the course of the game ranting in them that no one read them.
Yeah, which caused issues.
Yes.
But yeah.
And basically, they've effectively complete the game, but Karkat rushes when birthing the Genesis frog, the universe, and accidentally gives it cancer.
Yeah.
And that universe turns out to be where Earth is from. So he gives our universe an expiration date by mistake. And right before they go to try to claim victory and like rule the new universe as gods, that's when the big bad Jack shows up and nearly kills them. They actually have to literally escape their session. So the session kind of sort of succeeded, but they never got to reap the rewards of it.
Yep.
And that brings us
to the retconned timeline, which is a retcon version of this session where instead of Terezi killing Vriska gets knocked out by a John with retcon powers,
Yes.
and that changes the timeline enough of with Vriska alive that they end up winning the game.
well, sort of.
Yeah, it changes. It is a lot.
Basically, later on in the story, a human character named John, he gets... we should probably talk about... just so you know, we're aware that it's been hypothesized that John becomes transgender and turns into June at some point. So if you're wondering why we're not using she, her pronouns, it's simply because that hasn't happened yet. We'll be happy to actually do it once, if that turns out to ever be canon or dubiously canon or anything of the sort. Okay?
Yeah.
But right now in the material, the character is referred to as John. So anyway, John gets retcon powers.
Which is powers to change the alpha timeline without creating Doom timelines.
Yeah, like normally, like time players, whenever they go back in time and change the timeline,
they have to have a stable time loop or else they create an offshoot Doom timeline.
right? With the exception of one of the big bads, Caliborn. His ability as Lord of Time is that whenever he uses time travel, paradoxes and like what paradox loops always favor what he wanted to happen anyway.
Yeah.
Well, retcon powers, what they do is they let you change time, but the doomed timeline becomes the alpha. It's effectively time travel powers, but you get to change what's considered alpha.
Yep.
Which is extremely overpowered,
Yeah.
but necessary for the plot. So Vriska had to die. But later on in the story, John's basically like, it'd be really great if we had Vriska. And so he goes back to this A2 session and realizes the choice here was whether to let Vriska go and get them killed or for Terezi to kill Vriska. John goes, well, I could just punch her and knock her out. And that's what they do. So the retcon timeline's almost exactly the same, but now Vriska didn't have to die. Anyway, Earth has been made, right?
Yeah.
And eventually the humans on Earth do...
The B1 session.
Right. So what should we talk about first?
Okay. So more than just the kids in the main story played Sburb.
Oh, right, because on Earth, and the B1 Earth, Sburb was mass-produced by a game company, Skynet, so that everyone could play it. So there were hundreds of sessions. So that's what we're talking about?
Yes. The failed sessions, basically, where other people played but failed.
Yes. It's implied that most of the sessions failed, but there were also so many that we don't know what happened with most of them. It's kind of a mystery in Homestuck, what happened to all the other sessions.
Yep.
When the main kids are starting off their game, they're literally like going through like GameFAQ, the FAQ, the website.
Yep. And they find out that most of the players didn't even make it past the meteor coming to destroy their house.
However, there are a few known of these alternate sessions played by other humans that were known, if not to have succeeded, at least make some amount of progress.
And one of those was the Fedora Freak session, which is a friend of John's dad
Yes.
that ended up playing.
Yeah, John's dad was this, very clerical business type of guy. And he had a friend who went by the online alias Fedora Freak. His real name was Dr. David Brenner. He was John's next door neighbor.
Oh, huh.
And yeah, so he's another very clinical business type of guy, and he plays the game. However, in the process, his entire family dies.
Yeah.
So he becomes the only surviving person in his session.
Yeah.
And tries to survive. He also goes God tier. He gets really lucky and goes God tier almost right away.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that.
And we simply never hear from him again. We have no idea what happened.
Yep.
Hopefully he's out there. He just, lives the rest of his life in happiness or
We'll
whatever.
see. Yeah. This is the problematic part because Obama played a session of Sburb.
Yeah, that's why we had to kind of address the Obama stuff. So it turns out the way Obama went from B1 to B2 was through his session. He played a session of Sburb himself.
Yep.
And that's how he was able to escape the Earth getting destroyed.
Mm-hmm.
And because of some time shenanigans, it seems that, whenever you play the sessions, you have a dream self, right?
Yeah.
And that dream self is there for however long it took until the first player awoke the game.
Yep.
So, we've seen characters that, have been dreaming in their session for years.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it turns out Obama had a dream self that was in the session for possibly decades.
Oh, wow.
And a person he met in the session was named Dirk Strider.
Oh.
And it was probably Dave's older bro.
Yeah. Yep.
Because that was the Dirk in this universe.
Yeah, the guardian of Dave.
And because of time shenanigans, they happened to meet at a time when they were an equal age. And for some reason, Homestuck decided to think that Obama was gay, and they got into a romantic relationship.
Oh, I forgot about that.
I really don't like...
Wait, wasn't he, bi, though? Because, Dave says, what about Michelle?
Yeah, sorry. He would have to be bi, because he obviously still liked women. My bad.
Yeah.
But apparently he also liked men.
Yeah, it was a weird thing.
Which,
They portrayed it as a thing that it was just Dirk. Because Dirk was that attractive or whatever. It was weird.
Yeah, but I mean, it was already problematic doing a real-world character like that. But to literally rewrite their sexuality...
It's just kind of blah.
I mean, it's not as offensive as making a real-world gay person straight, so you make a straight person bi.
Whatever.
It's still, you didn't need to do this. This
it's cringe.
Indulgent.
Yeah.
But basically, it's because this version of Dirk spends time with Obama that later, when there's a multi-universe thing going on with Dirk, he remembers this happening.
Yep.
Anyway, somehow Obama, the session's not successful, but somehow he manages to hop skip from there to the next version of Earth.
Mm-hmm. And then there are all the Doom timelines, which again, there are a lot of them.
Right, which means we have to get into the main session, the one sort of successful B1 session.
And that one's Jade, Rose, Dave, and John.
Exactly, they're the 4 human kids that play the game.
Mm-hmm.
And I say sort of successful because they're the ones that created that big bad Jack. He just went to attack the trolls later on.
Mm-hmm, yep.
And because they created him as because their first guardian was this dog named Beckwirl, and Jack effectively takes Beckwirl's powers, they created an unbeatable boss.
Yep.
And that boss ends up destroying their session within a single day. The trolls had 6 months for their session.
Yeah.
But the humans, they got it only one day. So the surviving trolls are messaging them, giving them tips on how to beat the game super fast so they can actually survive.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I was just going to say, you have a feeling it's going to be a long day.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Anyway, a whole bunch of complicated nonsense happens. Effectively, all of the Guardians die. John's dad, Rose's mom, Jade's grandpa. Well, I guess he was dead a while ago. But her dog. Well, technically, Jade fuses with her dog. And then Dave's bro. Yes. Yep. They try to play the game and fight the kings and queens like they're supposed to. But when Jack comes about, they effectively just have to run from him because they can't beat him. Mm-hmm. Eventually... Jade or they coordinate to do the scratch to reset the game, and Jade makes a portal that takes them out.
So that they can scratch it and then leave their session to go to the new one that they created when they scratched.
Right, kind of like how Mina had scratched to reset it, but she couldn't figure a way out of the session, so she just killed them all.
Yeah.
They're going to escape. Jade manages to find a way for them to escape and still stay alive by making a portal into the hussy space and crossing over in the higher dimension.
Yep, because she's the Witch of Space and can do that.
Exactly. And so that's
Oh, right, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to skip to talking about the alpha so much, because there's a whole bunch of Doom timelines.
Yeah, there were, and some of them we need to talk about.
Yeah, so like basically, like the main one is already kind of doomed, but there's so many other ones that are doomed. Not as many as the Trolls. In fact, they have very few Doom timelines compared to the Trolls. But there are some notable ones.
The Draconian Dignitary timeline. Which one was that one again?
Yeah, basically, he's one of the chess piece guys. Dee Dee comes to steal the copy of the game from Dave, and Dave tries to use his new time travel powers to go back and stop him, and Dee Dee kills him. So Dave's like, I don't like that timeline. I'm not going to go down that one.
Oh, right, yeah, yeah.
So that's basically it. It's a dead Dave timeline.
There are lots of dead Dave timelines.
But that's one of the few that we get to see.
Yep. And then there's the Dave Sprite timeline, which is where John gets tricked into going into the final boss early and gets killed. And so Dave and Rose had to play the rest of the session themselves because John never got Jade into the session or whatever.
But they couldn't make any progress.
Yes. So they decided to just play out as long as they could and then go back.
Right, so Dave basically grinds out some loot. Fortunately, in this alternate timeline, Jack never comes to power, so that gives them some extra time.
Yep.
And then Dave goes back and becomes his own sprite guide for the other Dave. Dave Sprite. Then there's another timeline called the Dead Dave timeline. This is just the one where Terezi tells Dave to make a choice between ascending to godhood early.
Or not, and this is the one that ends up getting killed.
Yeah, both timelines happen.
Yes. He chooses not to do it, and so the Dave that was going to ascend to godhood just gets killed by Jack.
Yeah, but the thing that doesn't make sense about it is he was killed on his quest bed. So this dead Dave should have gone God tier. Oh, wait, no. Because the problem is that Dave went back in time, so he didn't have a corresponding dream self.
Right, yeah.
Right, but basically, if Dave had gone through with it, there was a possibility he could have gotten a second, like a backup god, but that was never really going to work out. It was kind of a bad plan from the beginning.
Yep.
And then?
The No Arm timeline. What's that?
This one was in a spin-off comic, the Paradox Space Comics.
Oh.
Where, one of the things about Jack is that he only has one arm. Because one of the things that constructed him was a one-armed Harlequin doll.
Yep.
And that was created when John accidentally threw a few glass pieces at a doll. One of them knocked the arm off, another one damaged the eye. This is an alternate timeline where he threw one extra shard of glass and knocked off the other arm. So then, at the climactic moment when Jack is created and faces them, he puts on the ring and gains the powers. His arms disappear because the Harlequin doll that gives him the powers has no arms, and he takes on the attributes of the things that were absorbed into it, right? And so his arms disappear, the ring falls to the ground, he loses the powers. He picks it up again, puts the ring back on, but then his arms disappear again, and then he loses the powers. And the characters are just like, this is a Doom timeline, isn't it? And John's like, yeah.
It was funny.
And then we have the Alpha timeline. That's the one that actually succeeded, where the Trolls helped them, and they, Jade ends up helping them escape. You can tell when it's an Alpha timeline by the fact that the Trolls are talking to you, because the Trolls only have access to the Alpha timeline. So whenever they go into a branch, or like, for example, in the Dave Sprite timeline, they didn't hear from the Trolls at all ever since John went early.
And then John also retcons this timeline.
Yes, what are some of the retcon differences again?
I don't remember.
There were small things here and there, like at one point he went to go get the wallet, at one point he put some oil around. Honestly, John's retconning differences don't make that large of an effect on the B1 session, because a lot of it was over the course of a very short span of time with a lot of events that had to happen, otherwise you would change the entire trajectory of events.
Yep. But when they scratched, they created the B2 session, which was Dirk, Roxy, Jane, and Jake.
This one was made from the players of the alternate Earth that went to complete crap.
Yep.
The one that ends up getting ruled by the Condess and the alien fish lady. But yeah, so those are the 4 kids that end up playing the game, and this is all when they were younger and nicer.
Yep. Because these are the same kids that became the guardians of the kids in the other session.
Yes, Rose's mom, which is Roxy in this universe, is the aesthetic kid that gets to play.
Yeah.
And, so forth.
And there are also Dune timelines in this session, of course. I don't remember any of them, honestly.
What were some of the Doom timelines? Yeah, I don't think there's actually any that are portrayed. We're just kind of supposed to presume that, like normal, there are Doom timelines.
Yeah.
It's just this session was a void session. It was literally unbeatable because they had they had basically missed one of the early steps when setting up the game that made it unbeatable.
Yeah, basically, this session was infertile. If a session is a reproductive system for the universe, this session wasn't fertile. You couldn't create a universe out of it.
Yeah, whereas the other sessions were more just kind of like, they could have worked out, but you failed. This one's just like, no, there's no chance.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of why you don't see a lot of Doom timelines for them, because they just wasn't a lot to do.
Yes. And also with this session, something that we find out is that you can kind of figure out whether your session is fertile or not by the roles of the players, because a valid session requires a time player and a space player.
And they don't have either.
Yep.
But then you do have the alpha timeline.
The alpha timeline.
And the alpha timeline is kind of nuts for this one.
Yeah.
Basically, the 4 players come in, they all die as they do so, but they manage to survive dying by going god tier and whatnot. However, the Condess invades the session, and do you remember the troll Aranea from the A1 session?
Oh, yeah.
She resurrects and comes back to life, deciding that she doesn't like how the story's going, and she's going to try to take over.
Yeah.
And so there's this huge brawl, because right at the same time, the trolls from the A2 session and the human kids from the B1 session, they show up to help out the B2 kids.
Yeah.
Right as the Condess and Aranea and several alternate timeline versions of Jack show up, and there's this huge big brawl. It's called Game Over, because basically everyone dies.
Yep. Yep.
It's a huge event in the story where just everyone dies, and this is the alpha timeline.
Yeah, I sobbed after that one, remember? I was freaking out.
However, the alpha timeline starts glitching out because there are certain story elements that don't make sense. For example, there's a character called Caliborn who hasn't been brought into existence. So this timeline doesn't make any sense. And so it starts glitching out. That's when John, one of the few survivors, gets retcon powers. He has to make the story make sense. He has to fix the time loop, the paradox.
Yep.
He doesn't know that, of course. He just wants to save his friends.
Yeah.
So he makes the retcon timeline.
Yep.
And he does this by going throughout the different planets and the different sessions and making a few changes as dictated by his friend Terezi. Because she's an expert planner and whatnot.
Yeah.
Strategist.
Yeah. So
he does all that and basically retcons the timeline in such a way to actually prepare them for the fight. One of the things being Vriska's there to help them with their strategy. So this time when the fight goes down, everyone's super prepared. Everyone has a plan. They have some extra characters there, some extra sprites to help them out. And they do a coordinated attack. They beat the Jacks. They beat the Condess. Who was the other one? Oh, Aranea isn't even a thing in this timeline. They prevented her resurrection.
Yeah. So yeah.
And that's the retcon timeline, and it ends a lot happier. They are able to work together to birth a new Genesis Frog, a sea universe. And they are able to reap the rewards and leave and go there.
Yep. But what about the retcon Doom timeline?
See, that's the thing. That's the next one we got to talk about.
Yeah.
After they leave and they go to the C universe to go live happily ever after or whatnot, at some point John realizes, wait, what about Lord English, the big bad villain of Homestuck? He was born in the C universe, so that's taken care of. We got that. But weren't we supposed to kill him at some point?
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that.
So, if you don't remember, Lord English is the Condes's boss.
Yeah.
He is literally the biggest bad of all in the Homestuck, in the original Homestuck. Homestuck 2 is another story. We'll talk about that later. But in the original Homestuck, Lord English is the big bad.
Yep.
So John, as an adult, because he really procrastinated, uses his retcon powers. For the record, this is kind of dubiously canon material. We'll go into what that means in the next Homestuck episode. John uses his retcon powers to go back to the game over Doomed timeline. Okay? And starts changing things there. So the way this works is he already retconned the Doom timeline, the game over one.
Yeah.
And made a better one where people survived, right? That's the alpha. So this is the first time we saw him use his powers to retcon and go into the Doomed one, the game over timeline.
Yep.
He changes things there, making a sort of alpha Doomed timeline?
Yeah.
Think about it this way. Here's how I do it mathematically, okay?
Okay.
The game over event, where everyone dies. So let's say that has a value of 0. Right? He goes and he retcons it and makes a new timeline. That one has a value of 1. 1 is bigger than 0. That's the alpha, right? He now then goes back to the 0 game over timeline and retcons it again. But now he only goes up to a 0.5 because there's already an alpha timeline there.
Yeah, okay.
So this is now the new Doomed timeline. And in this version of the Game Over Doom timeline, right before everyone dies, John shows up and grabs his friends and like whisks them away and be like, oh, hey, everyone, we had to fight Lord English, and this timeline doesn't matter anymore. You're all about to die in like a few minutes. So why don't we go die fighting Lord English?
Yep.
And that's exactly what they do. They go die fighting Lord English. But with the help of a whole bunch of casted characters, they manage to succeed and kill Lord English.
Yep.
So that's the retcon Doom timeline. Takes care of a few loose ends of the story.
Yep. And then there's the C session, which is Earth C after they create their new universe.
Yes. And that's where a cherub plays the game. A cherub is an alien species we haven't talked very much about yet because it's native to Earth C. Although it's implied that there were cherubs in every universe, but Universe C was the only time a cherub managed to play the game. Cherubs have 2 personalities, one nice, one mean. And their names were Calliope and Caliborn. Now, basically, once John set up the retcon stuff and saved the game and Universe C was made, that created a universe where Caliborn was born. And he killed his alternate self, Calliope, and he won the game. This is called the Meat timeline. Right?
Yeah. I didn't know it was called that.
Well, it's the Meat timeline of the C session.
Oh, yes, it is, because this is also the timeline where John is the one that goes back and makes sure Caliborn gets, Lord English gets killed. Right. So, like, it creates a stable loop where he's born and gets killed in the same timeline.
Right. And this is the way the story goes, effectively. It completes the loop. Caliborn gets into the game. He's supposed to lose. He refuses. He becomes the Lord of Time. And he starts becoming basically this mass destroyer because he refuses to ever give a crap about anyone besides himself. However, in Universe C, there's an alternate timeline split. The meat and candy ones. We'll talk about these later. But the result of which is in the candy timeline, John is asked to retcon Gamzee. Gamzee is the person that raised Calliope and Caliborn.
Oh, yes, yes.
So when John does that in the Candy timeline, Caliborn and Calliope are raised very differently. And Calliope, though being the nice one, becomes a lot more aggressive and harsh and better at survival. She ends up winning. Mm-hmm. And this is the alternate version of the C session, where Calliope becomes the muse of space.
Mm-hmm. And there's only one of these. Yes. It only ever happens once.
Right. So this version of Calliope basically sets it upon herself to try to preserve all of the alternate souls and ghosts that are out there in existence, all the doomed timelines. Mm-hmm. Whereas Caliborn became Lord English, the destroyer of the game, the big bad. Calliope tries to become, the protector. Mm-hmm. And even when, Homestuck 2 happens and Lord English is long gone and some other big bad comes about, this Calliope sticks around, becoming a literal black hole, with the idea of anyone that falls into her is under her protection.
Mm-hmm. And then there's the Homestuck 2 thing.
Oh, wait, we forgot to, just so you know, though, the way the actual C session worked was basically a billiards game. Planet billiards.
Yeah.
Like, Caliborn had to, knock all the planets into a normal black hole.
Yeah.
Well, sort of normal. Not the Calliope black hole.
Yeah.
And it's not clear exactly how that went for Calliope. It's kind of implied that she basically stunk at the game and just chose the path of the martyr. Mm-hmm. Now, what were you saying?
We gotta talk about Homestuck 2 now.
Yes, and we're only going to touch on it briefly, to be honest. Mm-hmm. But basically, in Homestuck 2, the new big bad guy is Dirk Strider. They introduced this concept where after God tier, there's another type of ascension, and you can ascend to your ultimate self, where you have the personality and memories of every alternate version of you that's ever existed. Mm-hmm. Which means the personality you have as your ultimate self is emblematic of your core qualities of how you would tend to be. So, so Dirk, for example, we've seen a timeline where young Dirk was very nice and helpful. He had some troubles, but he was a good person. Mm-hmm. But we also saw a timeline with Bro, where Dirk was an abusive father figure to Dave. Yeah. And was completely incapable of being a parent. And was the boyfriend of this neoliberal drone strike murderer.
Yeah.
War criminal. So that's just two examples, but Ultimate Dirk turns out to be a real butthole.
Yeah.
He's basically a Satan figure.
Yeah, he's such an asshole.
He's an egomaniac. Mm-hmm. And
he basically tries to start a new session, and it hasn't happened yet, but we're expecting him to start a new session.
He keeps talking about it. He keeps planning it. He basically settles on a new planet called Detritus. Mm-hmm. A, B, C, D. Mm-hmm. So we'll see if it actually happens. It hasn't actually happened in the story yet, but knowing Dirk, he's going to make it happen one way or the other.
Yeah.
Right now, they're still trying to figure out what species is going to play the game.
Yep.
And that's all the sessions of Homestuck.
Yeah.
Do you have any questions, Kira? We have 10 minutes left. We were really trying to summarize it because I know we wanted to not have this episode go long, but we might have overdone it a bit. Anything you want to talk about?
I think you did a really good job explaining the sessions, to be honest, because like, it's a very complicated and entangled concept. Like, a lot of the sessions are entangled within each other.
Yeah, time travel and all that.
Yeah, and I think you do a good job of unraveling that and sort of laying it out in chronological order.
Right, and so we've talked about the various planets. We talked about Earth. We talked about the troll planet, whether you call it Alternia or Before-Us. Mm-hmm. And now we've done the sessions. Mm-hmm. Our plan is that next time we'll maybe try to talk about what goes on in Universe C, which is also called Earth, but it's Earth C. It's a very different version of Earth.
Yeah.
And that's where most of the Homestuck epilogues and Homestuck 2 takes place.
Yeah.
So we're going to have to follow up with that later. But we wanted to talk about the sessions first. And there's still some other events that we won't have covered. For example, there was a period of like 3 years where half the characters were in Hussy space traveling on this golden ship, and the other half of the characters were traveling through Paradox space on this meteor.
Yep.
And so, that's 3 years of content we haven't really gone over because they were kind of like in a limbo, right?
Yep.
But, they aged up the characters and whatnot. We were mostly spending this time talking about the actual events of the various game sessions, and I guess we did that. I find it particularly interesting some of the failed sessions. I wish we got to see more of those that weren't Obama.
Yeah.
Ultimate Dirk literally has a signed picture signed by Obama.
Oh my god, really?
Yep. He says it's one of his most prized possessions.
Oh my god, fuck Ultimate Dirk. He's so awful. I hate him.
Yeah, I agree. He's a pretty awful person. One thing I really like though is his alternate is his what's the word? His foil character is Ultimate Calliope, the Muse of Space. And what's really interesting is even though she's like basically an unquestionable good, she wants the characters to live happy lives, and right now that means crushing Dirk. Despite all of that and her being framed as an obvious good guy, she still has clear authorial biases.
Yeah.
Like whenever candy comes into the story, she's like, the character must consume the candy. Because she just loves candy. And meat. That's a cherub thing. Cherubs love only two things, candy and meat.
Yep. I do like that. That is interesting. The only character I might hate more than Ultimate Dirk is Jane in Homestuck 2.
Yeah, she does kind of turn into a horrible person.
So it's between Jane and Dirk, honestly. I can't decide who I hate more.
Nana would be so disappointed.
Yeah.
That's a nice version of Jane.
Yeah.
Fortunately, Homestuck 2 does go into a lot of LGBTQIA plus representation.
Oh, yeah, it's awesome.
Yes, so like, Roxy transitions. That's cool. Calliope transitions. Who else? Anyone else? I think Pester Quest revealed that Vriska was trans, which is interesting. And that Eridan may have wanted to be gender fluid, but didn't really go into it.
Yeah.
We'll have to do a Pester Quest episode to really delve deep into this, because I need to research this before I make such claims with audacity.
Yeah, definitely.
But the point is that there is a lot of representation.
Yeah, it's really cool. I like it.
And I mean, like, Dave is gay because he's with Carcat.
Dave.
Bye. Sorry.
Dave Cat is so canon.
Wait, actually, is Dave bi? Because I know he kind of liked Jade, but he was kind of standoffish with her.
He never really dated any women. So I'd say he's kind of gay.
I think if you asked him, he would give you a 3-paragraph answer.
Yep. And you would still not know whether he was gay or not.
It would turn into a rap.
Yeah.
No, he definitely likes men. He loves Carcat. Mm-hmm. The question is whether he really loved Jade.
Yeah.
And if you made me guess, I would say he's bi because at least part of him loved Jade.
Mm-hmm. Fair enough.
But we're getting into epilogue content. We're going to have to save that for an Earthsea episode. So you know what? We're going to log off now.
Yep. All right.
This has been us talking about Homestuck. I guess check back in soon for us to talk about Earthsea.
Yep.
Bye.
Bye.
Check out our Twitter. It's called Game Theorems. And we have a Fallout series called Cinema Fallout, where we play Fallout on our YouTube channel from a anti-fascist and leftist lens.